Hi and welcome to the Assessment 3 Critical Reflective Essay mini lecture. So for this mini lecture, I just want to take you back to the reflection capability and go over a few of these definitions. It's really useful to keep these in the back of your mind before you start this assessment. So the cultural self, that's being able to look at our own culture, define our own culture, and that's a really crucial part of being culturally safe. So we often think that being culturally safe is about understanding someone else's culture, being an expert in that someone else's culture, but it's really more about looking and identifying our own worldview and our own culture. So reflection is just pretty simple, looking back on an experience or a situation with the intention of drawing insight that may inform future practice. But when we talk about critical reflection, it's more of a guided process. It aids in analysis and increases the potential for transformation. So the critical reflection steps include questioning, defining, reflection, analysis and learning, and we'll actually use those steps in this assignment. And of course, self-reflexivity is having that ongoing conversation with your whole self about what you're experiencing as you're experiencing it to improve relationships at the time. So it's about really being critically reflective in the moment. So just keep those definitions in the back of your mind, and now we'll go through some tips and tricks for assessment 3. So if you're having difficulty getting started, I would really like to refer you to the mini lecture for topics 3.2, 3.2 and 3.4. They are in one mini lecture under topic 3.2 self-reflexivity, but we'll also discuss this extensively in class in the Reflection 1 workshop. And this mini lecture is a guide to help you in completing this assignment. So firstly, we ask you to do a concept map, to create a detailed concept map that explores the subject that has resonated with you in the First People's Health in Practice course. So you should ask yourself questions like, what has resonated with me the most in this course? What are key concepts within this subject that stood out to me? How do these concepts make me feel? And how did I react when I heard this? Why did I react or feel this way? And then continue to ask yourself why and unpack each of these concepts in detail from your personal, professional and the dominant cultural lens. So, what do we mean by subject? A subject is literally anything in the course that has resonated with you. We've been asked a lot by students in previous years, what does this mean? So it can be a specific topic from the course content like white privilege, or it can be something more abstract like dispossession. But this is a personal and individual assignment. It may not be possible to choose the same subject as your peers, and I would actually recommend you not choosing the same subject as your peers. And even if you do choose the same subject, the way that you look at that will be completely different. So there is no right or wrong subject, but what's important is it's something that resonates with you, because you won't be able to write this assignment in the depth that you need if it's not something that resonates with you. So that's really important. So our concept map. We start with looking at our subject and the key themes, all the key concepts associated with this. So we've got 5 here. I'm saying that the impact of history and colonisation, this is the thing that's really resonated with me. And these are 5 key concepts related to this. But we then ask you to focus on one, and this is so that you can really get the depth of this. So I'm going to focus on the stolen generation here. And then we ask you to attach an emotion to this, because usually when something's resonated with you, it's because you've had some kind of emotional response. So I'll say that I was shocked when I learnt about the stolen generation. And you can ask yourself why. So this is where your critical reflective questioning starts to come in. So why? I didn't know about the stolen generation. Or why? Because I didn't get taught maybe by the Western education system. Or why didn't I get taught? Because maybe it wasn't seen as value. Well, why wasn't it seen as value? Because maybe there would have to be some acknowledgement that the stolen generation occurred. And why? Because maybe there would have to be some accountability. And what we want you to do is really to question deep and to keep asking why until you find yourself not being able to ask why anymore. Now that's really looking at it from a Western education perspective, and that's considered a dominant cultural paradigm. So of course you can draw links back here. you might see your concept map getting really complex and a lot bigger than this, and that's what we'd really want to see. But if you were unpacking this from your personal cultural lens, you could go and say, well, I didn't get taught by my parents. Well, why didn't they teach me? Because maybe they didn't get taught, or maybe they didn't know it wasn't of value to them. So you can unpack that in different ways using different lenses. When we're looking at and analysing this, we're asking questions like, what are some of the impacts or effects on this, on First Peoples, on healthcare? Those sorts of critical inquiry questions. But then I'm saying that perhaps this wasn't seen as value to the Western education system. That might be a pretty big assumption. So what does the literature say? And so this is where you bring in evidence, because what we still want to see here is that this is an evidence-based analysis. And when we start to do part B, you'll really start to unpack this part of your concept map. Now, I've just included a concept map of an example, and this is provided to you in the Assessment 3 folder on Learning at Griffith, just to show you that this concept map can get pretty detailed, and that's really what we would expect to see. So, submission of the concept map. You submit the concept map at the beginning of your essay. It's worth 5 marks, and it will really help you to plan your essay. So definitely do this before you actually start writing. The words in the concept map are not included in the overall word count. All right, let's look at part B, which is 2,000 words, and this is your essay. So after completing the concept map, you want to use this as a guide and write a critical reflective essay, and you use the following steps. So define and discuss the subject and its key concepts, and then choose one concept to write about. Reflect on how your own culture, as well as your professional culture, influences your understanding of the concept and your perceptions of and interactions with First Peoples. Analyse the viewpoints, the causes, effects and underlying issues and/or assumptions of others in the dominant cultural paradigm relating to the concept. Discuss what you have learnt from this process and how this learning influences your perceptions of and interactions with First Peoples in healthcare, and discuss how your future practice may be transformed as part of this process. So let's look at these steps in more depth. So you want to define and discuss the subject and its key concepts, and choose one concept to write about in this section. The weighting is only 10 out of 100 for this section, so use this to think about how many words you might write in this section. And I've just copied the rubric here in the highest category there. So in the define section, we're looking for an insightful definition and discussion of the subject, and you must support by reputable evidence found in scholarly literature. So we're talking about journal articles more so than grey literature. So when we're looking at our concept map, this is essentially what we're defining here. So our concept, our subject, and our key concepts there. All right, and then we have to reflect on that concept. We reflect on our own culture as well as our professional culture and how this influences your understanding of the concept and your perceptions of and interactions with First People. And this one is weighted 20 out of 100 marks. Again, looking at the rubric, we're looking for insightful reflection. We're making sure that we bring in both our own culture and professional culture, as well as looking at perceptions and interactions of First Peoples, and again, using exemplary evidence from scholarly literature. So again, going back to the reflection capability, this is looking at our cultural self, but it's also looking at our professional self, and we'll discuss this extensively in the workshop, but it's also available in the mini lecture that I mentioned earlier. So then we move on to analysing. We've looked at the concept from our own personal perspective, we looked at it from our professional perspective, but then we want to move wider. So we're analysing the viewpoints, causes, effects and underlying issues of others in the dominant cultural paradigm. So analysing, this requires you to look behind what's happening for underlying issues, causes and effects. It's about identifying others' viewpoints, assumptions and deconstructing the specific issue. Analysis helps us make meaning of the issue at both a personal and professional level. Again, this is weighted 20 out of 100 marks. And our analysis here is much the same, but again, this is probably where you'll use the most literature. So you're really looking at your assumptions, analysing dominant viewpoints, breaking down the subject, but using evidence to support this. So when we say dominant cultural paradigm, a lot of students get confused. So we're going to break this down. Dominant meaning the peoples who have power and influence. Cultural are the ideas, customs and social behaviour. And a paradigm is the processes, set of patterns and models. So the dominant cultural paradigm is really reflected in the big structures of our society in Australia. So this may include the culture of Western medicine, the culture of Western education, nursing, of health, of Queensland Health, of Griffith University, the media, those sorts of things. So we've looked at this, and this part here is our analysis. So it's really breaking down the underlying issues, the assumptions, the viewpoints, the effects, the causes, and the dominant cultural paradigm. So step 4 is learning. So after you've done all this, you've looked at yourself, your professional self, and then wider, you're discussing what you've learned. So what is it that you've learnt from this process, and how will this now influence your perceptions of and interactions with First Peoples in the healthcare setting? So it may help you to ask questions like, what have I learnt? What are the implications of this learning on perceptions, on interactions, partnerships, on relationships with First Peoples? And it may help to identify how your viewpoints have altered from before doing the course. Again, this is weighted 20 out of 100. So the learning rubric, so an insightful reflection and discussion about what you've learnt and how this may influence perceptions of and interactions with First Peoples in the healthcare setting. So transformation, the last step. Now that you've discussed what you have learnt, we need to know what will change now. This is kind of the so what. So discuss how your future practice may be transformed. And it may help to ask questions like, what will I change about my practice? What will I do differently? Why? And provide some examples. And this is weighted 15 out of 100. And again, an insightful discussion on this. And it's really important that you provide some detailed, tangible examples of how your practice will transform and why your practice will transform. And you can bring some evidence into that. All right, so please note, reflection is about your own cultural self. It's about being honest with yourself and being willing to take your narrative to a level that you might find challenging. You might feel a bit of discomfort. It might be uncomfortable to tell your truth. But really, if you're willing and prepared to go to this deeper level, the potential for learning and transformation personally and in your practice is immeasurable. So we really advocate that you try to be honest and to be open, because that really comes across to us as readers as well. So frequently asked questions, you do not need to do an introduction and conclusion. It's really important, going back on the last point, is that we're not actually marking the content. So we really, we challenge you to be open, because if you're sharing stories, if you're sharing experiences, we're not marking those at all. What we're marking is that you followed through the process and you've gone into the depth required. So that's really important. Yes, you do have to reference, as I've stated through this. Subheadings are accepted and you don't have to do them, but it's completely up to you. In-text references are included in the word count, but the reference list at the end is not. When we're looking at references, we're looking at peer-reviewed articles, so journal articles, no more than 5 years old if possible. If the article is more than 5 years old, then ask yourself, is this the latest literature on this topic? So at times, you can stretch it to 10 years, and we know that a lot of this literature, it is a bit older, so that's fine as long as it's the latest literature on this topic. So other times, for example, ABS data, we would expect the most recent. So the most recent census data is 2016, but there are still some health statistics that are from 2015. Of course, you can use seminal documents, so the Bringing Them Home report on the Stolen Generation, 1997, and the National Aboriginal Health Strategy, which we still use as a seminal document from 1989. These databases are just some that might be helpful for you, and we do expect you to do APA 6 formatting. All right, some helpful tips. We have provided an example essay in the Assessment 3 folder. Now, it's really important that this example is provided to show you how to write in a critical, reflective way. It's not intended to show you what to write. As every person's culture, our worldview, our values, our belief systems, our experiences are unique, your reflection content will differ to this example. Again, there's no right or wrong answer for how to write this essay. Do not try to do part B without doing part A first. Your assignment will not have the depth. It may be a bit disjointed. The essay should almost look a bit like a journey, and I think the example essay provided to you shows what that journey might look like. So it's really useful to have a look at that. Do not leave this assignment to the last minute. It is challenging, it takes a long time, and it requires critical thinking. So do give yourself the time you need to do this. And be mindful of appropriate terminology and othering, and we talk about that as well in the workshops. So what will you submit? The Griffith University cover sheet is submitted electronically via the Assessment 3 folder, and then once complete, the submission point for Assessment 3 will become available. You'll do a title page, include your name, student number, assignment name and word count, then your concept map, and then your critical reflective essay, and then your references list. And that is all submitted as one document via Turnitin. How we receive feedback, we give you individual feedback through your assignment. So the marker will provide some comments as needed, and then a comment that aligns with the rubric or marking guide against each criteria, and an overall comment. And then at a group level, we'll post an announcement with general feedback as well. If you are needing further support, then check the discussion board. We check that quite regularly, and students have used this in previous years and found it very useful. So do check the discussion board and post any questions on there. But if you require further support, contact your campus convener or learning advisors. And we hope you have found this useful.